Casey Kindernay. For my co-culture presentation, I decided to do long-term care. I am a long-term care nurse, and I wanted to explore the co-culture of being a long-term care nurse. I have been an LPN for 5 years. I work at a nursing home, and I wanted to address some of the common misconceptions that are held about healthcare workers that work in long-term care as opposed to other settings. So here's my PowerPoint. Let's begin. So ever since I became a nurse, when someone has asked me, "Oh, what do you do for a living?" I say, "Well, I'm a nurse." Inevitably, the first question they ask is, "What hospital do you work at?" And I always internally cringe because every time I've been asked that and I say, "Well, actually, I don't work at a hospital, I work in long-term care," I always get that look like, I'm sorry, like I'm somewhat less because I don't work in a hospital. And I never really understood why that is. I just think a lot of people have a lot of misconceptions about healthcare workers that work in the long-term care setting. And according to care.com, there are 15,600 long-term care facilities in the United States. That's 1.4 million patients. So we are everywhere. We are a large part of the healthcare industry. We are a large part of nurses in the country. So why are we kind of stigmatized the way we are? Working in long-term care, most of our nurses are LPNs. That's a licensed practical nurse. It's one step below an RN. An RN has an associate's degree. LPNs go to school for a year. We get a lot of the same training. There's just certain things that RNs can do that LPNs can't do. And obviously, if you work in a lot of settings in the hospitals, ICU, ER, cardiac, you really need that extra training. So that's why the majority of RNs work in hospitals or other settings that you need that associate's degree. Long-term care, we don't get the amount of critical care patients, obviously. So the majority of our nurses are LPNs because we can handle all those different issues without having to have that associate's degree. So obviously, whoever owns the nursing home, they don't have to pay us as much as they pay the RNs. Staffing ratios are very different in long-term care than they are in the hospital. Working in the hospital, an RN can see, depending on what unit she's on, 1 to 6 patients, depending on census. Obviously, if you work in ICU, they're going to have 1 to 2 patients. Those people need to be monitored very closely. A floor nurse could see 4 to 6, depending on the census. I myself, I've been LPN for 5 years. I have worked in long-term care for 5 years, and I have always had at least 30 patients to myself. Fresh out of school, I was a brand new nurse. My very first job, I worked night shift at a facility, and I was the only nurse in the facility all night, and I had over 50 patients with 2 CNAs. So it's very, very different. And it takes a lot of getting used to. It's also very physically demanding working in a nursing home. We don't have a lot of the equipment that they have in hospitals. For one, we have less staff in general. There's less people to help each other out. Less CNAs, less nurses, and a lot more people. Our lists that we use to transfer people aren't as good as what they have in the hospital. We still have to do a lot of manual lifting and turning and repositioning people. So it is very physically demanding. And also just having the sheer volume of patients that we have means we are always doing something for somebody, because inevitably somebody's going to be needing something all the time with that many people, and only so many people able to do things for our residents, if that makes sense. But something that's really great about working in long-term care is we have the chance to form real and long-lasting bonds with our patients. We have real relationships with them. We get very, very close and very attached to them and their families. You know, we can have the same patients for years, and when we lose them, it's very hard for us. And I think that this allows us to really advocate very well for our patients, because we know what's normal for them, we know what's abnormal for them. And a nurse in an acute care setting just doesn't have that kind of information history with their patients that we get with ours, and that's really rewarding. Duties and responsibilities for a long-term care nurse. We do pass medication. Every nurse passes medication, but I pass medication for over 30 people. So a lot of the times it takes me 2.5 hours to get through a med pass, because it's not like I can just go and pop pills and then leave. I have to assist a lot of people with taking them. A lot of people need other things while I'm in there. They need help getting to the restroom or getting dressed, etc. So it really takes a long time. Wound care. I'm a wound nurse as well. I do all the treatments for my people, dressing changes, wound vac changes, anything that needs a wound that needs change, I have to do that. Respiratory care. This is something that's really popped up with the COVID crisis. We are doing full respiratory assessments, listening to lung sounds, checking oxygen on everybody, every shift. We do IVs, we do blood draws, we do catheters, everything that can be done in the hospital, trachs, we do all that. We do have patients with central lines too, in the long-term care setting. We don't have patients that are intubated or anything like that, though, obviously. Assessments and documentation, a lot of my time is spent trying to find time to sit down and chart. And I know that's something that's universal across all nursing practices, is finding time to chart. A long-term care nurse wears many hats, and what I mean by that is we aren't a cardiac nurse, we're not a wound care nurse, we're not a dialysis nurse. We are all nurses. We have to know a lot about everything, because we have patients with everything. You have hospice patients, cancer patients, cardiac patients, diabetics, everything under the sun you're going to have. So you have to know how to handle all those issues simultaneously. Some common misconceptions about nursing homes that I've come across. Nurses that work in nursing homes are lazy. I don't really know where that came from. That's the last thing I would use to describe us, because we are so short-staffed all the time. There's so much to do, and 12 hours is just not enough time. I'm never clocking out in just 12 hours. I never have time to get everything done in 12 hours. I don't remember the last time I had time to take a lunch, to be honest. And it's like that for all of us, all nurses, all CNAs. We're just running. So I really don't know where that came from, but I can promise you that is not true. Another one is nurses that work in nursing homes are not as skilled or not smart enough to work in hospitals. Also not true. I work with a lot of nurses who have come from hospitals and then transferred over to long-term care, thinking that it would be a lot less demanding, and they said, wow, this is nothing like I thought it would be. This is way more work than I had to do on the unit. So that's also not true. And nursing homes themselves are these terrible places where the staff doesn't care, and that's where your loved one goes if you just don't want to take care of them anymore. And I really don't see that at all either. You always hear about horror stories of people being mistreated, but everywhere I've worked, that's not been the case at all. And I've shared this little cartoon. It says, I was going to ask how working with a severely limited staff was, but I think I can already guess. And there's this extremely run-down, haggard nurse. That is very accurate. So, in conclusion, I just want it to be known that all nurses are amazing. all nurses work hard, and that's what's beautiful about being a nurse and working in healthcare is there are so many opportunities, so many different settings, and they're all going to be different, and they're all going to be challenging in their own way. And I just wanted to bring some education that nursing home nurses really are kind of unsung heroes. We deal with a lot, and we don't have a lot of resources. So we do a lot with a little. We do as much as we can with the little that we have. And I believe that all patients are important, and therefore all caretakers must be important as well. So, thank you very much.